Firstly, the government will give an apology to those people in the Defence Force or the Defence Organisation or the Department of Defence who have suffered from sexual or other abuse in defence. That apology will be made by me as Minister for Defence on behalf of the government in the Parliament today at midday at 12 o'clock at the commencement of government business. I will say sorry to those people who have been subject to inappropriate abuse over their time in the Australian Defence Force. That will occur at 12 o'clock in the Parliament today. Secondly, we're establishing a task force to be chaired by Len Roberts-Smith. Len Roberts-Smith is very eminently and appropriately suited to this task. A former judge of the Supreme Court of Western Australia, a former judge of the Court of Appeal of Western Australia, a former director of the Legal Aid Commission of Western Australia, variously the Deputy Chair and Chair of the Equal Opportunity Board of Western Australia, Corruption and Crime Commissioner of Western Australia, and also a Judge Advocate General, a role which sees civilian legal oversight of the military justice system. Len will be assisted by a Deputy Chair, Robert Cornell, a former Secretary of the Attorney General's Department. Len and Robert will also be assisted by Liz Halliday, a former Commonwealth Sex Discrimination Commissioner. Rudy Lammers, who is an Assistant Commissioner with the Australian Federal Police, will be an ex officio member of the task force as he will continue his line portfolio responsibilities with the Australian Federal Police. And Len and I have agreed that if Len requires more members of the task force, once he and the other members have had a chance to make a judgment about workload, any further requests for additional members of the task force will be granted by me. The task force has been given the job by the government to do the following things. Firstly, for those people who have made complaints or allegations to DLA Piper, those people who wish to pursue, those men and women who wish to pursue those matters, the task force will seek to engage in restorative justice. In other words, reconciliation or potentially a direct personal apology from an alleged perpetrator to a victim. So there will be a process of restorative justice. Secondly, there will be a compensation scheme to be administered by the task force. That compensation will be to a maximum of $50,000. That is based on rule of thumb, some of the state-based criminal injuries compensation schemes that we see in existence. Those decisions will effectively be made by the task force, and those grants of compensation will not take away an individual's right to pursue other remedies if they choose. Thirdly, counselling will be made available. Fourthly, there will be reference to relevant Commonwealth avenues, in particular defence, the military justice system or the Australian public service system if we are dealing with matters that involve defence Commonwealth public service employees. Fifthly, reference to relevant state and federal police or investigative bodies as appropriate. Sixthly, I have asked Len and the task force to in particular look at two matters with a possible comeback to me by way of recommendation for a Royal Commission into two narrow areas. Firstly, the area identified by DLA Piper, what has become known as the ADFA 24. I've asked Len to pay particular attention to that. If he needs the powers of a Royal Commission or Royal Commissioner to deal with that matter, he will come back to me and those powers will be granted. Secondly, I've also asked Len and the task force to look in particular at the so-called HMAS Lewin matter, a training school in Western Australia where children were in HMAS Lewin, and there are very serious allegations of abuse. In those days, in the 60s and the 70s, children as young as 13, 14, 15 could formally join the Navy and go to such a training institution. So in those two areas, I've asked Len to come back to me with particular recommendations. If he needs the power of a Royal Commissioner in those areas, they will be granted. Some final matters before I ask Len and then Liz to speak to you. So far as the cost of these matters are concerned, including the compensation, the cost of the establishment of the task force, the cost of any compensation scheme will be met by Defence out of Defence's existing resource allocation. That's appropriate. If any organisation sees on its watch inappropriate or bad conduct, in the end there is a price to pay. In the end there is a price to pay. And so I have undertaken to my Cabinet colleagues that Defence will bear the burden of the costs of this matter. The expectation is that the task force will work initially for a 12-month period, and then will make a judgment with about 3 months to go as to whether an extension of time is required. Finally, in terms of parliamentary oversight, in the materials distributed to you, I've indicated that I'm proposing to make an annual report to the Parliament to give an update to the Parliament on the implementation of the various cultural and other reviews that we have seen put in place since April of last year. I think it's important that the Minister of the Day make those ongoing implementation reports. I also believe it's important that there be some form of parliamentary oversight so far as implementation of those recommendations from those various reports are concerned. Some of you may be aware that the Senate References Committee for Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade has a reference before it, essentially on military justice matters. I'll have a conversation or discussion with that committee to see what is the best mechanism for parliamentary oversight of the implementation of the various recommendations arising from these reviews, including any which come from Len's task force. In my analysis, the experience of Defence has been that as Defence has tried to grapple with these issues over the years and the decades, very often reports are made, recommendations are agreed, but often they are either not fully implemented or honoured in the breach. And that is something that I, the Defence leadership, the Chief of the Defence Force, the Service Chiefs and the Secretary are absolutely committed to effecting.